Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I want to quickly make sure everyone can hear me. Can we give a thumbs up if you can hear me? Great. Awesome. Well, we aren't going to wait too long to get started here. We have only 30 short minutes today with lots of great insights. So, would love if everyone, while we're waiting for these next couple of minutes, put in the chat where you're calling from, your name, your company, and if you're excited about anything that's going to come up in the webinar. I always love seeing people joining from everywhere globally. Lots of Denvers. I'm in Denver too. Okay, we'll wait about 30 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. We are going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, we only have 30 minutes, so want to jump in here and get things started. We'll kick off with some intros. I'm Shannon Ogborn. I lead community and recruiting advisory for the Americas here at Ashby. I was a former recruiter myself, so always really excited to meet with the talent community and bring you all valuable insights. Today, we are going to be talking about optimizing for quality inbound through strategic candidate attraction. Each of our speakers brings a little bit of different perspective and insight, so really, really excited for that. Just a little bit about how this is going to be styled, more so of a fireside chat. We will have a little bit of time, hopefully, for Q&A towards the end. So there is a questions tab down in the right-hand corner. Please put your questions in that. And even if you don't have questions, upvote. That's how we're going to prioritize how questions get asked. So please use that tab. Otherwise, really excited to introduce Jim, Alan, and Katie. So Jim, would love if you could pop in and give your intro first.
Thanks, Shannon. Hi, I'm Jim Miller. I lead the people function here at Ashby. I love this subject. Some of you will know that I led the inbound function at Google for many years. So this is a close to home topic for me. I'll hand over to Alan.
Great, thanks, Jim. I'm Alan. I'm the global head of TA at Deel. This is really resonating for me also because it's not just about kind of having the masses in terms of applications, it's how to decipher between the great candidates that are in those application channels. So yeah, excited to see how we uncover that talent in our pipelines.
And I'm Katie. I lead operations at Pave, coming at it from a little bit of a different perspective, not from the talent side, but more from the people operations and compensation side, and thinking about how you can use compensation as a lever to attract exceptional quality candidates through your inbound channel. So excited to sort of be in conversation with Alan, Jim, and Shannon.
Amazing. And thank you so much to Pave and Deel for helping us get this together. Really excited for these collective insights. So to sort of jump in on the first question, which let's go in reverse order. Katie, Alan, Jim. First, I would love to sort of frame this conversation up. Can you talk briefly about why candidate attraction is such an important part of hiring strategy? So we'll start with Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's the micro and then there's the macro when it comes to candidate attraction. The micro being, of course, you want to have a breadth of candidates in your pipeline. So referrals are, of course, important. Inbounds or outbounds are, of course, important. But inbounds are a way that you get maybe new faces, new types of people into your pipeline that you potentially wouldn't get otherwise. And I think that's really important. So that's at the micro. And then I think the macro, candidate attraction and sort of like candidate branding are so closely coupled that I think that if you can create a really strong candidate attraction motion, you also are really doing really great candidate branding, which I think can also serve you in a long-term horizon. And candidate branding, of course, goes into employee branding and employment branding and ultimately even customer branding.
Absolutely. I love that. Alan, what are your thoughts here on why candidate attraction is so important for hiring strategy?
Well, you're going to, we get about 30,000 applications a week, right? So I think that you have to, so firstly, it's great to cast the net far and wide, but it's equally important to also kind of understand the quality within those channels. So I think that that's a key driver and something that I'd like to kind of address a little bit later. For me, it all starts with affiliation and reputation. Do people like the industry? That's where they typically tend to start to apply. And then as you start to go through the interviewing kind of process and assessment process, then you start to have a look at how do you do your best job in terms of showcasing the people and the culture, the nature of the job and how they're assessed against those core competencies. And then also show some light into why join now around kind of personal development, along as some of the other topics around kind of compensation and benefits.
Definitely. And last but certainly not least, Jim.
Thank you. I think about it in terms of the key business drivers. So at the moment, quality of hire, representation, and the ability to scale in the future. And having a talent attraction focus on the inbound piece, having it as part of your omni-channel approach is critical. The folks with the aspirational goal of joining your company, it's the widest net. You'll find the people that you can't necessarily find through sourcing and referrals and so on. So you've got the best chance of hiring the best talent for your role. And it's also key to build your database for future scale. So being able to attract talent now that you can find later, and it's the most diverse channel. And that's key for you and as your organization to make sure that you've got an inbound strategy built into an omni-channel approach.
Love that. We're going to get into a little bit more granular questions for each speaker now. But like I had mentioned, for those who just joined, there is a questions tab. It's on the lower right corner. That is how we're going to be sorting through any questions. I figure there's such great insights with these speakers that people may have more granular questions about the work that they're doing. So please feel free to put those questions in that lower right-hand corner and we will answer them as many and as best as we can. So first question here is actually for Katie. So Katie, Pave is, of course, a compensation platform that helps companies pay competitively and responsibly. How do you feel like this impacts candidate attraction overall?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when a lot of people hear Pave or compensation, their mind doesn't immediately jump to how is this going to impact the quality of the candidates that I'm attracting, the volume, et cetera. Of course, compensation does many things, but one of the things that you can use compensation for is to start the sort of relationship of transparency with your candidates before they're even your employees. And so, compensation is one of the big reasons we all work. Otherwise, it would be potentially like volunteer work or not-for-profit work. And it's a huge, huge reason why companies will apply for your roles. At Pave, we definitely like to think like, yes, of course, there's the requirements of, California, New York, European Union requiring job descriptions, including salary bands. But how can you push transparency forward to up sort of like that candidate branding to really attract quality candidates? From my experience, if you have a really quality, transparent approach to like, what is your compensation philosophy? What does your promotion process look like? How are people getting paid? You in turn get a sort of candidate that comes inbound because they think of you as being like open source, like ultra transparent, and that's the kind of organization that I want to work for. I think that there's a really great example actually in the industry that I was made aware of somewhat recently, and that's company Posthog. They are sort of built on an infrastructure that is open source first. And one of the areas that they've adopted this philosophy of sort of open source and transparency that I think is really beneficial for candidate attraction is they outline their compensation approach. They have a little tool in their like essentially documentation that says how much would I likely get paid if I were to work at Posthog, and then understanding sort of like what the organization values when you think about like getting promoted, career progression, all of those different elements. And so I think that for me, like you can use compensation and you can use like as a really great tool to set a foundation of transparency with your potential candidates, and that can potentially attract higher quality folks who saw you, saw what you were doing, appreciated what you were doing, and were like, that's an organization that I want to work for. So been very, very, very inspired by that.
Yeah, I think that the post-hog compensation transparency is so interesting. And I also think, and I'd be curious, Alan and Jim, to get your thoughts on this. There are some companies that just simply don't pay in like the top percentiles, but I still feel like transparency is really important even for those organizations who aren't paying exceptionally well, because when people understand your compensation philosophy, even if you're not in the highest percentile, they may still be interested because you are so transparent about what's happening. Jim, Alan, any thoughts on that or Katie's sentiment? You're muted. There you go.
So much etiquette going on here. The more transparency, the better. Ultimately, the more transparent you can be, you can save the candidate's time from applying for a role that they're not suitable for. Ultimately, that trickles through into your organization to save the time in screening the resumes. So it becomes an operational efficiency play as well as an experience play and a brand play and so on. All of these things are intertwined. I'll talk about it again in a little bit. Just the impact against multiple different factors when you take these actions.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, yeah, and we'll come on to it in a moment, but, candidate salary and compensation isn't always the driving force around why someone would join, stay, and be motivated to do their best work at an organization. So for me, it's, there's a multiple of different factors, and you have to showcase through your employer brand, your value proposition, and how that resonates through each of the different touch points of the hiring process. So it starts with, at the start, right? The top of the funnel and the analytics, and then how does it kind of cascade through the entire kind of process flow? And then agree with Jim, there's a lot of efficiency to be gained through that process, because ultimately, you could love the people, the role, all of these things, and then it becomes a big disconnect, and then candidates and us then start to get kind of frustrated when you get to the end of the process where you've invested so much time, and then it's not a fit based on criteria that could be uncovered very early in the process, right?
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying that frustration is at an all-time high right now, with especially in tech with the market. And so being really conscientious of these things, I think, is both a benefit to the company and to the candidates. But Jim, I know transparency in the hiring process is actually something that's pretty important and close to Ashby as well. Can you talk a little bit about how that resonates at Ashby and things that we've implemented to keep transparency at the forefront of this candidate attraction and inbound circumstances?
Absolutely. As I said before, it's all about your business drivers. So if we're going to have a successful program of inbound, then accuracy of application is your biggest driver of quality and of efficiency. So, for example, we've recently had a recruiter role advertised, and we had 525 applications, and every single one of the 525 were recruiters. It's 100% accuracy. Now, some of them were great, some of them weren't so well matched to the skills that we were looking to hire. The key elements that we were building in there were closing dates. So we have a closing date stated on every job to make sure people feel they have the time to build their application and understand that we're going to screen everybody who applies for that role, not just the first 10, 50, 100 people who apply. We talk about why you shouldn't apply for the job, to help people save their time in that application, not wasting their time for the role. And obviously compensation goes into that. We're in effect selling people out of the job. Application questions. So one of our first questions that we ask on a lot of roles are, have you done X, Y, and Z? If you haven't, please don't apply, because you won't make it through the process. And you've now got all the rest of these application questions to ask. So I'm going to save you the time there, and we clarify that. And in effect, what you're doing is you're pushing people beyond the job title. We've seen the behavior of candidates, or I have through the luck of the exposure to all the data and so on that I've had over the years, and that the job title is that big driver. But if you can get people down into the job description to make a real decision about whether that job matches their experience and so on, you get a much better outcome. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're helping them visualize success in the role, and then we're making sure we've got the discovery elements right, so that job gets served to the right people to aid that accuracy in application. And all of that comes down to transparency.
100%. Alan, Katie, any comments there?
I love that. I'm going to take some of that away, Jim, actually. Like why you shouldn't apply, I think is really interesting, because then it helps us get down some of those CV reviews, right? Which is a big operational kind of efficiency. And it's just very clear in terms of what you're looking for in terms of functional skills and practices, behaviors, achievements, all of these things. So it's a higher quality touch point and experience.
I also really like that as sort of like the counterpoint to potentially of course, it's wonderful to add compensation to job descriptions. It's a legal requirement. It's also something that like is great for equity and so on and so forth. But especially with those higher level roles that see really big salary ranges there, I think that Jim, to your point, including like why shouldn't you apply, like ensuring that you have a certain set of experience is a really great way to potentially like offset like really big numbers that could potentially get somebody very excited, and they would apply even if they weren't the best fit.
100%. Yeah. I think the way that I love like why you shouldn't apply resonates most, especially for Ashby, is that we have a lot of player coach roles that are leadership roles, and not everyone wants to be a player coach. There's a lot of people who have been a coach for a long time, and that's where they prefer to be. And so when you very clearly state, like, if you don't want to be a player coach, then this is not going to be the right role for you. Like, you're going to have to be in the weeds. That's just kind of the way we operate in a lot of ways. And so I think that saves them time, it saves us time, and ultimately it gets us the highest quality inbound, which is what we're talking to. And I will say that when I set out to do webinars, my goal is always, if there's one person who takes something away as tangible, that is enough for me. Alan and a few others have already taken something away, so we've already seen some success here. But Alan, one interesting thing that we talked about is more about kind of a bottom funnel up approach. How does candidate attraction really impact bottom of the funnel? And can you explain a little bit about how you use analytics to get better at attracting the right candidates from the top, from those bottom of the funnel analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as kind of Jim mentioned on his example, we had 500 applications into one role, right? And you typically tend to see that a hiring rate from application to hired, varies per organization, but can range around the 0.5% mark at this point, right? It used to be 1%, and it's probably it's lower now today, right? So we're trying to find a needle in a haystack. So for me, it starts with being transparent in terms of what skills to assess, when to assess, how to assess, and who should assess. And then you can pave a lot of that into, your job description at the start. So you've got your functional skills and practices. right? You've got your behaviors, you've got your achievements, and also kind of motivations. I love, again, what Jim said around kind of filtering out kind of good people in that process, right? Or good people, not as a percentage fit to the process. And what we started to see was there was a lot of hiring managers, interviewers, etc., making kind of assumptions as to what the right kind of profile is. And when we look at some of the data, we were able to kind of prove and disprove some of our assumptions. So, for instance, we were tending to lean more to like the Halo CV. Right. So, hey, have they worked at this big organization? Starting to make assumptions. Well, hey, they've worked at this fast-paced environment. Then maybe this is going to be a good environment for them, right? And we actually started to like create personas across each of the different areas. And what we came to conclude is actually through benchmarking and looking at PMC data, quota and attainment for revenue, for instance, attrition data, all of these things, we actually didn't see a correlation between the Halo CV kind of experience being our top performing category. Actually, we saw it as a mediocre kind of category. And then when we started to have a look at some of those personas, like what is our top category? Because if you want to have an outcome, i.e. a salesperson hitting attainment, hitting quota, all of these things, then you have to then start to measure what is actually kind of going into, because if you look at your functional skills and practices, behaviors, business impact and achievements and motivation, then you can start to design your interviewing processes in a way that isn't just dedicated towards kind of experiences. So the CV review is an experience led. When you come into the interview, a lot of the questions are dedicated towards your experiences and all of these things. Then it's not kind of bringing to the floor or evaluating the skills that you actually see most successful. And then from that, you're able to then go back to the business and kind of prove and disprove kind of assumptions, right? And then what we also then started to see is we started to then evaluate a lot of what are the main kind of motivations and reasons for a company, for someone to join an organization. So, you've got your employer value proposition, of which, affiliation, reputation, mission, like that's the entry point primarily to like, hey, I like this industry, or I like that they're a startup and they're in tech, whatever it is. And then through the interviewing process, you can start to build your value proposition around, the people and the culture. Was they treated kind of respectfully during the interviewing process? Like the nature of work, like structured interview kind of questions. So it's very clear for them to understand what the nature of the job is, right? And then through that process, be able to kind of weave in kind of personal development around kind of some of their motivations that would resonate for them. And provide that kind of great experience. So our conversion rates of high quality kind of candidates really start to resonate, not just from an attraction and bringing them through the door, but also from a medium and long-term perspective of being able to do their best work and be motivated to do their best work, right? And then hopefully that then leads to lower attrition rates and all of these things. Whereas if you don't quite get it right, and you're just looking for something that doesn't necessarily kind of fit within your organization, then you will see a lower degree of motivation, and you will see a higher degree of kind of churn risk if you don't address it as the full cycle.
Absolutely. I think it's such a good point that all of this actually impacts the outcomes when people become employees. And while it's sort of out of remit of recruiting at a point, it's not, in that there's things that recruiting, hiring managers, executives can do at the front to make sure that they're positioning a role accurately, getting the right candidates so that the candidates are happy in the role, they stay longer, they're more motivated, it's more like it's a better fit opportunity for them. So I love that. If there's not any comments, there's a lot of questions. So I'm just going to jump into these questions. Jim, it looks like you already answered Asha's question. So I'm going to move down to Brian's question, which is, what is your approach to highlighting transferable skills and capabilities that would help a non-traditional applicant assess their fit for open roles like without going too broad. And happy for anyone to jump in and answer this one.
I'm happy to go. I was halfway through typing on that one as well. So I think, again, it comes down to transparency. Where you have a role where your risk profile enables you to bring somebody in with transferable skills. And I get asked this question all the time. Hey, I'm in the talent space. Can I come and be a CSM at Ashby? And we will have certain roles where we're willing to take that risk. And we've got a ton of folks in our business who started off their lives as recruiters and other functions within TA spaces who are now come on board because of those transferable skills. But it comes down to that transparency piece. You as a talent leader need to go and have the conversations with your business to understand their appetite for it. And then where you do find that opportunity, be really clear about it so that folks can discover the job, and then understand that they've got the chance, and then they can articulate it through the applications and through adjusting their resume, just exactly where they've got those transferable skills. Show the evidence.
Totally. Katie, Allen, anything to add there?
I think going back and looking at folks who are potentially already in that role, who have been successful, who come from maybe atypical backgrounds, is also a really interesting way to sort of like force you to say, is this role something that could come from a transferable skill set, or is it somebody who we actually need X months, years of experience doing this job at a like company? It is a potentially good way to think through that. I think so often we get stuck being like, oh no, this person must be a CSM at another sort of talent company, and a lot of times that is true, but a lot of times it's also not. So I would encourage us to think about who else has been successful.
Absolutely. Allen, anything to add on that one?
No, I think a lot of things are covered. I think it also just comes back to like the intake, right? So again, like how we look at it is functional skills and practices, it's behaviors, it's achievements and motivation. And then you look through past examples of people that have been successful. I think you can't lean too far left or right. So it really depends on like the makeup and the construct of the team. Because if you've got a number of kind of, CSMs that, have training appetite for folks coming in, and therefore a lot of your focus can be on kind of behaviors and transferable skills, then I think that, you have got that organization to be able to flourish. I would say that too much leaning into that type of, recruiter profile, moving into a CSM, for instance, if you've got an imbalance within your team, then, that person could be successful, but just not in that specific environment. So I think it all depends on where the team is organizationally. So then it comes back to, when recruiters and heads of talent and all of these people start to assess like the dynamics of the team, then it's not just, hey, these are the skills, these are the requirements. We've done this role 6 or 7 other times. The brief is clear, right? Things change.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. The goal is to fill the gaps within the team based on experience, expertise, background. And so the job description may actually change hire to hire in the exact same role, which I think is oftentimes overlooked for sure. I know that I'm not sure if it's Anna or Anna. Jim had already responded to your question about what he would recommend about how to get more applicants as a small startup. One of my favorite podcast episodes that we've recorded on Offer Accepted was with Jim, when he was saying, we actually were on the topic of inbound, and he was saying, use the industry standard terms for your job description. So if it's a customer success manager, call it a customer success manager, not there's kind of wild terms across the industry for certain roles. And so even sales, use the industry specific terms, the industry standard terms, and I think you're going to get a lot more applications that way. That's was part of Jim's advice from a previous podcast session. There's one more question that may be worth answering, and then we'll have to say goodbye. But Jim, I see you typing. As AI products advance, how can we better identify if the candidate actually has experience we're looking for versus utilizing AI to align with keywords and job descriptions. We actually have an upcoming webinar for a feature launch that's on September 10th, AI assisted application review. Maybe Jim, you were going to talk about that, but
I was first of all going to apologize because this banner should have advertised that, and now I realized that this is talking about something from February, and the banner was too big for the background. Colin isn't a plant, I promise. Yes, we have that launch, but to answer the question, what I find is that if you articulate the criteria, write it down, that you're going to use to screen resumes before you dive in, then you start to really take a different approach to reading resumes rather than just looking for keywords. And instead, you're looking for more of a holistic view of that profile. And you do that before you start your resume screening. That's my one tip. And that's, watch this space.
Absolutely. Well, we are at time. So as we wrap up here, I hope everyone gained some valuable insights. I always do, from these. So hopefully you got something to take back from your role about boosting candidate traction. We will be sending out a follow-up so you can watch this again, share with folks. And I hope that you all will give Ashby, Deel, and Pave page follows for more high-value content webinars. Our next webinar from Ashby is around capacity planning with JT Haskell, who was formerly at Reddit, Kraken, Zapier, Pinpoint, all great companies. And so I will be sure to include those details along with the details for the AI assisted application review that we were just talking about. If you have any questions, concerns, feedback on webinar topics you'd like to see in the future, absolutely feel free to reach out to me directly. And otherwise, we will see you next time.